Hello, and welcome to the Multilingual World podcast. If, like me, you're fascinated by language and languages, you've probably asked yourself questions like, how multilingual is the world? Where are the world estimated 7,000 languages spoken, and which countries have the lion's share? How is this wealth of linguistic diversity managed by individuals, groups, and governmental authorities through language policies, and what are the consequences of such choices? Why do people stop speaking and transmitting their heritage languages and shift to dominant languages? What can we do to stop the 60 to 90% of the world's languages from disappearing? To explore these questions and many more, I will be interviewing influential academics and multilingual speakers living in Manchester to discuss aspects of multilingualism in different parts of the world, dispel the myths of inferior and primitive languages, and most importantly, we will discuss how language science contributes to improving access to better education and health, and how central it is to socioeconomic development and to fight social inequalities. I'm Dr. Serge Sagna. I'm a lecturer in linguistics at the University of Manchester, and I'm very excited to welcome you to the Multilingual World podcast. So, welcome back for a new episode of the Multilingual World podcast. Today, I'm very excited to introduce our guest, Professor Ayọ Bámgbóṣé. Do I pronounce it well?
Yeah.
Yeah, who is a renowned linguist and a specialist of African linguistics. So, Prof, you were born on 27th of January 1932 in Ogun State. Can you tell me a little bit about your early life? How many languages you grew up speaking? What kind of environment, linguistic environment, did you grow up with before we get into, linguistics properly?
Well, I grew up in a village, and in the village, it's mainly the Ijebu dialect of Yoruba that is spoken by the majority of the people. So, although I was quite young at the time, but I learned the dialects. I learned to speak the dialects of Yoruba, and also standard Yoruba, because that's the means of general communication between those who speak the dialect and others. When I went to school, of course, we started in Yoruba for teaching. They taught us in Yoruba. We read the primer and so on, the alphabet, Abidi, yeah. And we didn't encounter the English language until about 4 years of schooling. It was only after that we started go to the door. What are you doing? I'm going to the door. That kind of stuff. And that was my background. At home, of course, my father and my mother spoke to me in Yoruba. So it's not a question of learning English at home. It was always Yoruba.
So you're talking about standard Yoruba. You learned standard Yoruba earlier on. Was there already a standardized form of Yoruba at the time?
Yes, there was.
How old were you?
There's a standardized form of Yoruba, which is the written Yoruba.
Right.
But if you have to communicate with someone speaking another dialect of Yoruba, that's you approximate to the standard.
Right. Okay. Because some of the dialects are not mutually intelligible, or what is it?
That's the point.
Okay.
the thing that Samuel Crowther did for Yoruba was to translate the Bible, the Bible, English Bible, into Yoruba.
Yeah.
And since this Yoruba, standard Yoruba, was the means of learning in primary schools and higher,
yeah,
everybody got a bit of that.
okay.
There are people, of course, who up till today can hardly depart from their dialect.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
as I keep saying, even when you say you speak the so-called standard Yoruba,
Yeah.
I can detect, maybe because I'm a linguist, I can tell this man is from here, that woman is from there, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So growing up in that environment, was it common for people to speak many languages, or were you an exception among the people who just spoke Yoruba? I just wanted to, my question is, how multilingual was that environment?
Yeah, well, the opportunity to speak the standard form of the language,
yeah,
can only arise when you have communication with other people. For
yeah,
example, if you go to the church,
yes,
you will not expect that you will speak, the hymns will be in standard Yoruba and so on. You will not use your dialect. In
yeah,
fact, we make fun of people who use their dialect in singing hymns in the
right,
church.
yeah, okay. Was that funny? Did people find it funny that other people use their dialects in church?
Yeah, because that's all they can do.
Yes, okay.
And it's laughable because when it comes up, it turns up, the meaning is different.
Right, okay, okay. So that's very interesting because 4 years of schooling in Yoruba, that
Yeah,
means you actually experienced mother tongue education before you even started writing about it.
yes. That was the standard practice in those days,
Yeah,
that you needed to have a background in your language. The teachers will teach you that you do the alphabet, we
yeah,
do stories,
yeah.
the
Basic,
tortoise, yeah, all these things.
basic
And
math. Sorry,
sorry,
sorry, I used to interrupt. I meant basic maths. Did you learn basic maths in Yoruba first? Basic maths, mathematics.
yes, 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 all those things we do. No, it's not just the language.
Okay.
The mathematics is there. We did that. Calculation, arithmetic, everything was done. There were terms for this.
Okay.
It's like, I'm sorry to say this, when we talk of language education in
Yeah.
South Africa,
Yeah.
people say that they didn't have any, they did have terms.
Yeah.
Even under the apartheid thing, they did have terms. So we had terms.
Okay. We'll come back to this education, the issue on education. But let me continue to introduce you. So you grew up in a Yoruba environment, and then later in your schooling, you did a BA at the University of Ibadan, which was then affiliated with the University of London. Yeah.
Yes.
And you went on to do a PhD in linguistics at the University of Edinburgh in 1963.
Yeah.
And you became the first Nigerian professor of linguistics. In some places, they say the first African professor of linguistics, even, in 1968.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and in your career, you published a lot of influential work. So one of them is actually 20 books and over 100 articles. This is really impressive and inspiring for us who are trying to follow your path. And just to quote a few, you have the Grammar of Yoruba, which you wrote in 1966, and with Cambridge University Press, right?
1966.
1966, yes.
Yeah.
And Language and the Nation, 1991.
Yeah.
And Language and Exclusion, 2000.
Yeah.
These are some of the many, many books that you've written. And you have a long list of achievements and honors, which include being the first African to receive an honorary membership from the Linguistic Society of America, being the first African linguist to act as vice president of the Permanent International Committee of Linguists, and being the foundation president of the Assembly of Academicians of the African Academy of Languages. So I think it is fair to say that you are a pioneer and a patriarch of African linguistics. So, Prof, I'm really honored to have you today, to welcome you to the Multilingual World podcast of the University of Manchester. Thank you so much for taking time to come to speak to us and to share your experience as a person and as a linguist. Hopefully this conversation will inspire, linguists and Africanists around the world who are trying to, work on, African languages. So let me start my questions.
Sorry, may I just make one correction?
Yeah, go ahead.
The university at Ibadan,
yeah,
was not University of Ibadan. It
Ah,
was University College.
I was University College.
Because it was affiliated to University of London.
Right. Okay.
It was in 1962 that it became the University of Ibadan. Just
Right.
correction.
That is important. That is important because, like when I look at your biography online, I can only go from what I see online, right?
It's okay. It's
Yeah,
okay.
thank you very much. So over the last decades, you produce outstanding and inspiring work, as I said, right? Outstanding research that is used for teaching. I use your work for teaching. And what I want to discuss today is your work on language, policy and planning. And I want us to use Nigeria as a case study, right? But we will cast the net wide enough to include, the situation in Africa, maybe around the world too. And some of the main questions I want to, answer are, how do language policies advantage sections of citizens and marginalize others? What can be done to implement more inclusive language policies in African countries? And what role can linguists play, in their country's socioeconomic development? Now, the conversation might take a different direction, but these are generally, the topics I want to cover. And if we go on to discuss other things, I'm happy. This is a conversation. It's not a journal article where we have to stick to the topic at the beginning, right? So let me start by, going back to your book, which is entitled Language and Exclusion, which is out of print, by the way, and sadly, because I want to get my own copy, but I can't get it. I can only borrow it from the library.
I'm surprised about this because the University of Leipzig in Germany, they should have copies.
Maybe they should reprint it because, I want my students to get copies. I want my library to get copies, but even I can't buy a copy myself.
Okay.
Maybe you should contact them. and ask what can be done. So in that book, you argued that the choice of colonial languages as official languages has resulted in the creation of two classes of citizens. And you labeled those classes of citizens the included versus the excluded. Now, 25 years after the publication of this book, how do you analyze the relationship between these, colonial, some people call them ex-colonial languages, and the indigenous languages of, let's say, Nigeria and Africa?
Well, the the so-called colonial languages, which I politely refer to as imported languages. These languages are dominant by the very reason that they are official languages. Because when there's an official language, all the activities in government are done in that language. It is the language in which things are recorded, in which business is conducted, in which parliament operates, in which banks, health, and all these other things are done. It also involves education, because beyond the earliest levels, primary 1, 2, 3, and so on, most schools move over to English in the case of Nigeria. So you can see that unless you go to school, unless you are educated as such, then you just cannot be among the included. You are basically excluded. Now, and the excluded includes not only the illiterates who cannot read and write, it also includes the out-of-school children. They start and they drop out.
Yeah.
So the question which arises is it possible to say that these people who are excluded are in any way included in any form? Now, when I wrote the book 24 years ago, the English language was very, very dominant in Nigeria. The change that has taken place is very minimal.
Mm.
You now find people who insist on Yoruba being taught, even in secondary schools. People take degrees in Yoruba in universities, but that's marginal as far as I'm concerned. I'm more concerned about the generality of the people who have to interact in our economy.
Mm-hmm.
It is in the local market economy that these people can function and use their language.
Yeah.
I go to the market in a village and I want to buy yams, no problem, because I can use my language.
Yeah.
But the problem arises when you have to move beyond that and you go to an urban area, you have to go to the bank, you have to, in fact, these days there are many things that happen and they say you must register your phone.
Yes.
You must register your personal number, national identity number.
Yeah.
I know people who have not been able to do this.
Yes.
Because they just cannot function.
Yes.
In this way. So the question of exclusion is a very serious matter, and it continues. That's the main point I want to make.
So basically, the choice of a language as an official language results in creating a section of the citizenry that cannot function in the development of the country.
Precisely.
They cannot participate. There's an issue of participation.
Precisely.
And if you have, I don't know what the percentage of Nigerians who are comfortable using English is. But if we say, for example, that is around 25%, that would mean that 75% of the population is excluded from participating in the development of the country.
You mean those speak English?
Yeah,
those
those who speak
English
English
by
who can.
25%.
Yeah, I'm just giving a figure.
That is very generous, my dear. Very generous. Although, you know what I often say.
Yeah.
When you do the census,
Yeah.
for those who speak English,
Yeah.
there are market women who will say to you, customer, come. Very nice, nice oranges.
Yes.
That person speaks English, right?
Yes.
But that's the repertoire is limited to only that place.
Yes, exactly.
The people who really can function well in English are probably 10%.
That is scary.
That's, yeah, about maybe 10%. Because as we were saying before, there are people who claim to speak English.
Yeah.
They're knowledgeable English, but they are really not.
Yes.
I once mentioned the case of members of Parliament, National Assembly, who are where the language of communication of proceedings is English.
Yeah.
And they're there, they are elected by their people.
Yeah.
They're supposed to represent their people.
Yeah.
Sponsor bills, make motions.
Yeah.
If, contribute to debates.
Yeah.
And we have seen cases of people who have spent 4 years without saying anything. Just sit there, they are bench warmers.
In Parliament.
If you are counting people, you say that man is one of the people who can speak English.
Yeah.
But truly, he cannot.
So you have people who have a 4-year term in the National Assembly.
And they don't say anything.
A single word.
Well, let me correct myself when I say they don't say anything.
Yeah.
When you put a motion, those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. That's English.
That's English.
That's the limit of their English.
So wow. So they don't even have the English. I mean, they don't, function in the language of communication in the National Assembly.
Precisely.
But how do they campaign then? So they campaign in their
they campaign in the local language.
In the local language.
Oh yes.
And they get to the National Assembly where things really happen.
Yes. And they also add a sweetener, which is you give them something.
You give them something to so you give what? Give something to the voters.
Do you think you can become a member of National Assembly without you see, our people are not stupid.
Yeah.
In a way, if you look at it.
Yeah.
They hear on radio how much people are paid.
Yes.
Once you get elected, they know that you're going to be earning millions.
Yes.
Naira.
Yeah.
And so they say to themselves, before you go and enjoy, give us a little bit of what you are going to get when you get there.
If you don't get there, you're losing.
Yeah, because if we don't vote for you, you won't be able to get it.
Yeah.
So deliver.
Yeah. So if we look back at the Nigerian Constitution, the 1999, its Article 55 says that the business of the National Assembly shall be conducted in English, in Hausa, in Igbo and Yoruba, when adequate arrangements have been made therefore. So you're telling me now that there are members of parliament who spent 4 years in parliament and are not able to contribute significantly to the debates.
Yeah.
Now, based on this article of the Constitution, one would think that some arrangements would be put in place to make sure that at least members of parliament represent the people who have voted for them. What is the situation then?
Well, the sections that you have quoted are exactly the same as in the Nigerian Constitution of 1979. It's just a repetition of what was there 20 years earlier.
Yeah.
So in 1979, when the provision was put in, efforts were made to implement the requirement that you can use Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba as languages of communication in the National Assembly. And the steps that were taken were, one, to ensure that we have a good way of getting the languages so we can have something like a dictionary of the various languages, so you can translate from English to Yoruba, Yoruba to English, to Hausa, to Igbo, and so on. So one of the major things that was done was to have this language development and have this quadrilingual dictionary. It still exists today.
Okay.
Yeah, it is there. The other thing that was planned was that there will be training of interpreters so that when one is speaking, there's someone interpreting.
Yeah.
This was after the 1979 Constitution. Then we had an election. The military went, because in 79 we were still under the military.
Okay.
Yeah, the military went off and we had a civilian government. It was the civilian government that was trying to implement this.
Okay.
But in 1983, we had a coup. And we had a military government all over again. So all the plans that were made, that we were going to do this, we were going to do that, just fell off. Because when you are under military, you don't need a parliament, you don't need to debate anything. Just pass what we call decrees, which come with immediate effect. So that was the end of that experiment. So in 1999, when the military were going away again, and they sponsored this constitution, which you've quoted from, they put in the same clauses.
Okay.
They put in the same clauses.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, nothing has been done beyond what was done after 1979. And I keep saying, as I said in my book, when policymakers make policy and they put it down, they make sure that there be an escape clause. And the escape clause is when adequate arrangements have been made therefore. So if you don't make arrangements, you can use the language. So arrangements have not been made.
Yes. So you just can brush it off and move on until the arrangements have been
This
made.
is it. This is it.
Oh dear. So talking of the military regimes, in 1996, about the Abacha regime adopted French as a second official language. I was wondering, how did you experience that as a linguist? And
Yeah.
how did you
that,
analyze it?
that is ludicrous. Number one,
Yeah.
I don't think Abacha understood what an official language is. When you say an official language,
Mhm.
you are saying that it will have exactly the same duties as the other one.
Yeah.
So we have two official languages, language and French.
Yeah.
How can you say French is an official language
Yeah.
when maybe not even up to 0.5% of the people can speak French?
Yeah.
But that's not the worst.
Mm.
They then change the language policy in education to say that French must also be taught from primary school when there are no teachers in universities to teach French. So really, you ask me, why did Abacha do this?
Yes, that was my next question.
Yeah, why did he do it?
Yeah.
He did it because the Western nations were against him.
The other Western nation.
America was, Britain was.
Mm.
The only country which had a little sympathy for him was France.
Why?
So he then thought, how can I hit America? How can I hit Britain? I will make them angry by saying French is the second official language of Nigeria.
This
So
is
that was what happened.
it's almost like playing with fire because because an official language is something really serious. It's something to be taken seriously. And as we said in the beginning, it is the tool that includes people in the development of the country or excludes them indefinitely sometimes.
Yeah. But again, although these things were done, a decree was made, the policy was altered, it's all printed,
Yeah.
but nobody did anything about it. Nobody did anything about it. If you have a second official language,
Yeah.
all your laws will be in English and French.
Yes.
But have you seen any publication
I've
from
never
Nigeria?
seen I have not seen the Nigerian constitution in French.
So this is it.
Not even in
So
after during
you
the Abacha
say a
regime.
thing like this, and you have no intention. That's declaration without implementation. That's it.
That so sometimes I wonder, I mean, you've been working with different organizations, with governments, and hopefully we'll talk about it in a bit. How often do governments invite linguists to discuss their language policies before they're passed?
Well, what happens? I will tell you what happens.
Yeah.
They only invite you when they want to use your name. They don't seriously consider that they're going to take your advice. Okay, we have a national language center, which is a department of government.
Yeah.
They put some of us on it. I was chairman of the National Language Center and an advisory committee. They are very careful. They don't call it a proper, we are advisory.
Advisory.
So we advise.
Okay.
And we make all these interesting recommendations. We went, saw what happened. The British Council came, they assisted, we made plans, what we can do with our own center and so on. But all these recommendations will go forward and they will do nothing about it. That's one. Number two, when they refer something from an international organization, like we're back.
We're back, yes.
Very strange.
I know. But yeah, at least we had a nice conversation, uninterrupted until now.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. So you were.
So the question is whether they use us.
Yes.
And the truth is that they underuse us. They pretend to use us.
Yeah.
When it suits them.
Yeah.
Like they will say there's going to be a policy on language.
Yeah.
And they would appoint a linguist to be chair of the committee.
Yeah.
This has happened recently.
Yeah.
And they work for a number of months, and then they'll come up with the national language policy. That has just happened, in fact, 2022.
Okay.
Yeah. The reason for that, of course, is that they cannot say we have a language policy without a linguist being represented.
Yes.
So that's why I say when it suits them, they use us. At other times, they want a big name, then they will involve me.
That is a shame, because when you compare to other fields of research, of academic research, like economics. So if they talk about economy, they will invite an economist. If you're talking about, political science, we invite a political scientist, right? If you're talking about medical research, you invite, someone, a specialist of whatever area of medical research they at least want to work on. When we're talking about language, it seems like every single person is a specialist of language. Maybe because we all speak a language, or we all sign, but we don't all sign. But why? How do you?
Of course, you got it absolutely right. When it comes to language, everybody's an expert.
Yes.
That's why they will say, why can't you teach the language? You speak it, don't you? So you don't need any training to speak your language. So teach it. That's the difference between medicine, economics, and so on. You need training. But for language, you don't need any training. That's the way they see it.
But this is, I think, maybe sometimes I wonder if linguists. Okay, let me ask this different. Let me start by asking it this way. How do you explain the resistance from politicians before I talk about the ignorance from politicians and the role of the linguists? So how do you explain that resistance from politicians? Why do they, maybe there's no resistance, but there's a level of ignorance amongst our decision makers that lead them to make uninformed decisions on language policy, like, using, French as a second official language in Nigeria, right? I think is comedy. Then there is, sometimes the resistance from the elite. How do you explain that? Before we go, remember that there is no education without language. There is no socioeconomic development without language. There is no meaningful political stability without good language management. Remember also that children and adults can function perfectly with multiple languages. So be a proud multilingual. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on our social media platforms, and see you very soon for another episode on the Multilingual World podcast.